Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a small departure from years past. We used to ask for a solemn atmosphere. But in life, there is hope, and in hope, there is happiness. Please feel free this year and continuous years to applaud, to show your appreciation and gratitude to the presenters and speakers today. Some of you might say, well, why are we here today? Why do we pick this day? January 30th, 1933, Adolf Hitler was selected to lead the Weimar Republic of Germany. Within a very short period of time, he asked for and was given dictatorial powers, and shortly thereafter, the first of many of hundreds of heavy-handed draconian laws were enacted, choking figuratively the life out of Jews and eventually virtually. And so it was from January 30th, 1933 until May 18th, 1948, when the newly formed modern state of Israel reached out and offered all Jews safe haven. Until that time, it was open season on Jews. What makes November 9th and the morning of November 10th so important for us, so memorable in the Jewish psyche? What is the great importance of this day to us that we should gather here to remember Kristallnacht? Is it the 91 Jews that were murdered that evening? Or the 29,000 that were hauled off to concentration camps? Or the nearly 1,000 synagogues that were destroyed, desecrated, along with thousands of our holy Torahs? Is it the shattering of glass of thousands of Jewish stores, which gave this evening its name, Kristallnacht? To give you an idea of how total the destruction was. Back then, Belgium was the #1 plate glass producing country in the whole world. If Belgium stopped their production just to replace the glass that was broken this evening, they would have to work 1 full year. That's how total the destruction was. And yet, the significance of this night is greater than any one of those single calamities. You see, Hitler was the Pied Piper, leading the German people like lemmings to a precipice of hell and damnation. It was the ginned-up frenzy of the common German people whose participation in this brutalization of their Jewish neighbors, which gave Hitler Incorporated the green light to move ahead with what would become the seminal act of the last century, the largest murder of a single people in the history of mankind by a modern industrialized nation. Collectively, this was the night that the German-speaking people in the Sudetenland, Austria, and Germany willingly leapt off the cliff into the cauldron of hell. There was no turning back. It was a free fall into the depths of death and destruction, the likes of which the world had never seen before, and let us all pray never sees again. There was no extricating oneself from this free fall, and before it was over, the German people too would suffer horribly. That, ladies and gentlemen, is why we are here, to remember a day that will truly live in infamy. By immortalizing the 460 names that you're looking at on the walls in front of you, of our loved ones etched on those walls, the ones that were taken during the Shoah, the Holocaust. These names merely serve to represent the millions and millions of others of our loved ones. My widower father, David, my twin brother, Walter, and I arrived as refugees from the Shoah, December 20th, 1950, in New York City. We wore big buttons on our coats with USNA on them. Those initials stood for United Services for New Americans. They and the Jewish Social Services, now the Jewish Family Services, were our gateway to America. Theirs were the shoulders that we stood on, welcoming us as strangers in a strange new land. This year, we were very humbly honored and remember those on whose shoulders we stood upon. If you see your name in the program, please look through the program. Please stand up at this time so I can personally see you and express some sort of gratitude. Those whose shoulders that we stood upon is there Jason Crumbine, who lent his back to this effort. Thank you, Jason. Is there Cynthia Crumbine, whose father-in-law Made sure. Thank you, Cindy. Is there anybody else here who we're going to decide to honor today? Anyone else here who helped the immigrants? Well, at the end of the service, if you're too, thank you. At the end of the service, what we'd like you to do, we're all going to take a stone to put on the wall to show that someone that cares about these people actually have arrived here. But those special people upon whose shoulders that we stood upon, we're going to ask you to come up first because we have a nice gardenia, nice flower for you to show a small token of our appreciation. A little word about Rabbi Matisyahu Friedman. Those of you who attended the Alan Dershowitz lecture in September will recall how Dershowitz heaped praise upon Chabad and Hillel for their outstanding work in countering anti-Semitism so prevalent on college campuses today. Rabbi Matisyahu Friedman stands tall wearing a yarmulke for Chabad and a Hillel yarmulke as well. At the Virginia Commonwealth University as the leader of Jewish life at VCU and Hillel Chabad collaboration. All of this in addition to assisting Rabbi Yossel and Mrs. Naomi Krantz, the directors of the Chabad Lubavitch of Virginia. When you first see Rabbi Friedman from a distance, all you see is a beard flowing akimbo. As he draws nearer and embraces you with his outsized grin, the beard disappears and all you see is a smile as large as his face and two sparkling eyes filled with a happy compassion. Crown Heights, New York was blessed to have him for as long as they did. They're even more blessed for sending him to enrich our fair city and to build upon our Jewish heritage. Please help me welcome Rabbi Matisyahu Friedman.
Thank you, Alex. Good afternoon to everybody. One man stood at the side of an open pit. It was a cold winter night. The people of the camp were called out to the lot, a vacant lot nearby, exhausted. The prisoners stumbled to this vacant lot and saw before them a large open pit. The Germans screamed at them, "Jump over if you value your life. If you don't make it, that'll be your end." And there they stood, exhausted, feverish, sick, swollen foot skeletons, ordered to jump over. Standing there was one rabbi, the Buz Hever Rebbe, Rabbi Yisroel Spira. He stood next to his friend, and they watched as the pile of dead bodies in the pit grew. The sound of the machine guns broke the night again and again. His friend turned to the Rebbe and said, "We shouldn't try. We shouldn't give them the satisfaction of having a good time. Let us lay down and accept our fate." The Rebbe said, "No." Rabbi Spira said, "Let's try." And together it was their turn. They took a step back, they closed their eyes, and in the middle of the night, over a pit impossible to jump, they tried. They jumped, and they opened their eyes on the other side. They made it across. They looked at one another, and the friend turned to the Rebbe. He said, "Rav Spira, how did you do that? An old man, frail, sick, injured. How?" He said, "I held on to my father, to my grandfather, to my great-grandfathers before him. I held on to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Yitzchak. I held on to our patriarchs, and on their shoulders I stood. It was to their coat that I held, and that carried me across." The Rebbe was a special person. He turned to his friend, and he said, "But tell me, friend, how did you jump across? How did you make it across?" And he said, "Rebbe, I held onto you." Today, in Jewish communities around the world, we mark the beginning of a Torah portion cycle where we read the third Torah portion in the Torah, first Breshit. This past Saturday, we read the story of Noah, and now we begin the story of Abraham, Lech Lecha. And of it, one of the great rabbis of old is recorded of saying that this week is a joyful week. 2 weeks ago, the Torah portion of Breshit began on a very positive note, but ended off towards the end of the Torah portion with the corruption of the people. The second Torah portion, Noah, ended on a positive note with the birth of Abraham, our first patriarch, but began with the horrific flood and the corruption that had filled the world. This week, the rabbi taught, is a joyous week because all week long, all Torah portion long, we read about Abraham. We read only about the powerful memory and story of our patriarch Abraham. I'm honored to be here today to speak to us as we too enter into a joyful week where we have terrific shoulders on which to stand, where we have our parents and grandparents and their great-grandparents before them, and we have Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, with which every day of our lives when we wake up and remember them, we're filled with joy to know that in merit of their sacrifice and in their strength, we stand here today. But I beg to ask you a question. Abraham the Great, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, there is no Torah portion named after them. Not one. All of our greats, we don't call them by memory. We don't call them by name. Instead, Lech Lecha, the story portion of Abraham means go forth. The Torah portion of Isaac is called Toldot, offsprings. The Torah portion about Yaakov, about Jacob, is called Vayetze, and he set forwards to journey outwards. There's a second one with him, with Jacob, Vayishlach. He sent forth, he sent forwards. Joseph's Torah portion, Vayeshev, he settled the land. There is one Torah portion named after Noah this past week, but he's not counted as one of our greats, as our patriarch. There is, you might say, Rabbi, one Torah portion named after Sarah, Chaye Sarah, the life of Sarah, but that only speaks about after she passed away. Why is it that all of our greats we stand here to remember by name? Our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents. Where are Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. And I think it's a very powerful message for us as we do stand here today, and that is, with their memory, the calling and lesson that God has for us today is don't remember only with their name. Lech Lecha. Take their name, take their memory, and move forwards. Journey onwards. Don't only stay with the greats that we stand on their shoulders, but now we are the next generation where we take the mantles and move forwards to secure that there will be a Lech Lecha for our generation and for the next generation. Abraham teaches us to sacrifice our time for Jewish education, to give another Jewish child a preschool opportunity, to bolster the options of Jewish day school and of Hebrew schools. Abraham teaches us to Lech Lecha, remember our greats, but move onwards to support Jewish social networks for teens, for college students, and for young professionals. Abraham teaches us Lech Lecha to strengthen opportunities and entry points for young families and unaffiliated. Abraham teaches us that we have great people that gave their lives figuratively and literally for us to be here today. Lech Lecha. Let's venture onwards so that we will be the Abrahams for tomorrow, and tomorrow there will be more Abrahams for the next generation thereafter. Today we remember. After the Holocaust, a notion was going around the Jewish communities, let us leave at our Seder table an empty chair to remember all those that cannot be at a Seder, for they are no longer with us. They asked many great rabbis, and one of the rabbis, his voice rung out with a call to action. He said, yes, we must add another chair to our Seder table, but do not leave it empty. Add one more chair and make sure to fill it with an individual who otherwise would not have gone to a Seder. And I do believe that today we stand here to remember, but not only to remember, we stand here to remember to venture forwards. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Rabbi. That was a lesson well told. Ladies and gentlemen, Tommy Bear, in addition to having a very successful law practice, has made many contributions to the Jewish community of Richmond, too numerous to list here. Let it be known that there will be 4 things for which he will be most remembered. The first is his tenure as as the president of the International, I'm saving that for later, B'nai B'rith from 1994 to 1998. Now, the B'nai B'rith, those of you who don't know, is a Jewish organization founded in 1843. It pursues educational, humanitarian, cultural activities and attempts to safeguard the interests of Jews around the world. From its founding in 1843 until 1994, they had 24 presidents. Tommy Bear was the 25th. The second thing they'll be most noted for was his private audience with Pope John Paul II. He represented the International B'nai B'rith at that time, and those of you who were at this gathering a couple of years ago will remember I spoke of that historic pilgrimage of Pope John Paul II to Jerusalem in March of 2000. The first pope to do so in the modern era. I read the prayer the Holy Father wrote and placed between the stones of the Wailing Wall. What I didn't know was the role Tommy Bear played in this most historic event. He used a short audience with the Pope, influencing him to make this pilgrimage to Israel. The third will be his modesty, soft-spoken but intense. Though I've known Tommy since 1986 and our paths cross occasionally, not as much as I'd like, hopefully more in the future. It was only a few weeks ago that he told me of this particular audience with the Pope. I knew of the audience because I reminded him, and that's when he went forth to tell me about his great accomplishment, truly great accomplishment, having the Holy Father come to Israel. The fourth thing will be his marriage to Betty. Though I believe that capturing her heart was the greatest achievement in his life, is probably what he would say. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me to welcome Tommy Bear.
Thank you, Alex. I've been called many things, but never a rabbi. Sounds pretty good. Add that to my resume. Things were good in Berlin and other parts of Germany. There was employment, there was education, general contentment, and freedom of movement. There was the stroll through the Tiergarten, or a swim in the Wannsee. There was laughing at a cabaret dinner at the Aden or the Romanische Café. There was the afternoon coffee and cake at the Café Bloom or Kranzler's Konditorei. All names unfamiliar to you, names you've never heard of, but the parents and grandparents of many of you here have. And then there was 1933. Imagine with me for a moment that it's 1933 or 1934 or November 1938 when I was still in Berlin, or 1941 or 1942. And you're from Germany, Austria, Poland, Latvia, Lithuania, or any other country under Nazi domination, and you're Jewish. Your entire world has come crushing down because you are a Jew. You can't work in your chosen profession or vocation because you're Jewish. You can't go to a park a beach, or any other public place because you are a Jew. Your children can't go to public school because they're Jewish. You can't shop at certain stores because you're Jewish. Edict after edict is more onerous and suffocating than the previous one. All Jewish support structures, including synagogues, including the Oranienburger Strasse synagogue in Berlin, where my parents were married. Organizations such as B'nai B'rith, which was abolished as a birthday gift to Hitler. An organization that was very strong in Germany at the time and whose president was Rabbi Leo Beck, who married my parents. And there is no relief in sight from inside or outside of Germany. The future is the present, and the present is a dangerous place to be, and your sole objective is survival. These are the huddled masses that yearn to breathe free. You want to get out, you have to get out, you must get out, and if you're lucky, you do get out, leaving family and possessions behind. You may have to go through another country, but you finally make it to a city you have never heard of, in a country you have only dreamed of. The city is Richmond, in a place called Virginia, and at least you're safe, but there's nobody to greet you. Except there is, and was. Because this is Richmond, with a long Jewish presence and a tradition of Jew helping Jews. There were Jewish organizations and individual Jews who assisted these refugees, put them to work, provided for their needs, used their skills, but more importantly, restored their dignity, uplifted their spirits, and affirmed their Judaism. Who were these individuals and organizations upon whose shoulders that first generation stood, together with the second generation and the third generation, and many of us in this gathering assembled here to honor them and to commemorate Kristallnacht? Unfortunately, we were not able as yet to identify all those who helped or received help, nor does time permit my referencing all those identified in your program. But we welcome to this observance all the relatives of those who gave support and who benefited from such support. So let me refer just to a few names you know and who are giants of our community. The Thalheimer family, the Markells, the Binswangers, the Schwarzschilds, Congressman Norman Sisiski, and so many more responsible for the rescue and resettlement of Jews to Richmond and other cities in the 1930s and 40s. William B. Thalheimer, already then well known for his work as the national chair of the Refugee Resettlement Committee of the Umbrella Organization for Jewish Immigration to the United States, together with his cousin, Morton Thalheimer, and William B.'s good friend and attorney Leroy Cohen, purchased the Hyde Park farm in Burkeville, Virginia in 1938. Favorable mortgage terms were obtained from the Central National Bank owned by William Schwarzschild. Hyde Park Farm became Hyde Farmlands and was transformed into an agricultural school for Jewish students fleeing from Nazi Germany. The full story is told in two books written by Robert Gillette. These two books. And if you like to see them, want to write them down afterwards, let me know. It's amazing. As a result of the courageous and persistent efforts by the Thalheimers, using influence, persuasion, pressure, and weaving through the complex immigration procedures of an anti-immigrant and a largely anti-Semitic State Department, dozens of Jewish teenagers were saved from extermination. Why did he do it? In his words, out of the idea to save lives. Many of the refugees resettled here by the heroic efforts of the Tolheimers and the others named in your program have, together with their children, become leaders in their respective communities. Such is the legacy of these passionate Jews who acted decisively, each in his or her own way, when few others did. Theirs was a commitment to honesty, character, integrity, and compassion, and justice, rarely seen today. Theirs are indeed the shoulders we stand on. Their lives have been for a blessing. Thank you.
Tommy, I'm sorry I got confused, but you'll have to remember that Alan Dershowitz, words not mine, could have been a conservative rabbi. We talked a little bit just now, as Tommy enlightened us with tales of the emigration in the 30s and 40s. Now we're going to shoot up to the 70s and 80s, and we're going to have a young lady, far wiser than her years, explain her story to us and the story of her generation. Irina Perelman-Korshin is one of the central characters in the film Draw Back the Curtain. Premiered in November 2014 at the Modlin Center, a story of resettlement, the film produced by the University of Richmond Hillel, along with the Jewish Family Services, went on to win several international awards. One being the Silver Award winner by the publication The Spotlight for documentary films in 2015. She is an American Wonder Woman. I wonder where she is now. There she is. Juggling a job with family obligations, with civic work, as well as being a fellow board member at the Emek Sholom Holocaust Memorial Cemetery, where we are all now remembering the past. I once told my cousin Cindy Crumbine that before I died, I wanted to do something great. Without hesitating and not missing a beat, she responded, "You already have." What could that be, Cindy? Jason, Sabrina, and Heather, those ladies and gentlemen, are my three children. She was right. That means Sarah and Josh, Ira's two precious ones, are proof she has already done something great, but she's only beginning. She's not nearly done doing great things. I'm going to call her professor because her curious mind, her intelligence, and her work ethic will take her down that path, the academic path. I'm certain. Please help me to welcome our future professor, Ms. Ira Korshin. If I take the class, I want a good grade.
Wow. Far, far too kind. Maybe one day, though. That would be pretty cool. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your time here today. Tommy Bears and Alex and Inga and many others came to this country much earlier than my family did, and they escaped the atrocities of the Holocaust. My family has those stories in the generations as well. And the story I want to tell you today is that of immigration to this land of opportunity, this great land, and the unknown city, Richmond. But it is also a continuation of what happened after the Holocaust. I was born in the former Soviet Union, Vinnytsia, Ukraine, a shtetl that has hundreds of years of Jewish history. However, the Ukraine I was born into harbored generations of anti-Semitism. From the age of 5, I can remember noticing that I was different. The amicable kid that I was then, and continue to be today, I greeted each day full of promise and opportunity. Yet I learned quickly that many of the kids in the playground and those in my class saw a wall between us that I didn't yet understand. Kids would say mean things like they would call my brother and I, Boris, Żydówka, or Żyd, which meant dirty Jew. When I stood up at the age of 6 in class as a first grader, on occasion there would be the giggles when they heard Perlman, or kids would say it out loud. On the playground, I saw many times my brother would get picked on, or that he would stand up for me, only to get pushed around and called dirty Jew once more. How can I express to you the overwhelming feeling of seeing your first hero in life disrespected before your eyes? I was 5, but I already understood the feeling of injustice. If some kids were playing soccer and the ball came our way, they might say, "Hey, dirty Jew, fetch the ball." On another account that my mother told me about, there was a little kitten that my brother was taking care of. One day, the kids in the neighborhood took the kitten and brought it to my brother. They carved the kitten's eyes out, and they held it in front of him and said, "See this? That's what happened to the Jew kitty." When I tell you these stories, I have shivers because as an adult, these are the stories that are all too familiar that I heard my grandparents tell of pre-war Germany. And those events that led up to Kristallnacht. It didn't end in post-war World War II in the former Soviet Union that I grew up in. Anti-Semitic acts were in the blood of generations, so deeply rooted that it reared its ugly head, poisoning small kids and filling them with hate that they didn't understand. Since before I was born, my parents thought of coming to America. So many did in the late 1970s, like the Tolchinsky family that was here that greeted us and helped us. Those immigrants that would come here in the 80s and 90s. But it wasn't until the late 1980s that the opportunity arose again for us to leave. Yet another anti-Semitic act, this time at my father's work, was the last straw. My parents realized that my brother and I would continue to face anti-Semitism in our lives and in our childhood, and that it would carry through to adulthood. You see, in adulthood, not much changed. When my parents went through school, grades were altered and downgraded for some vague reason. My father was supposed to graduate at the top of his class, but one of his teachers couldn't live with the fact that a Jew had accomplished this on his own. And so she gave him a B for her class. Both of them received their medals of recognition in some inconspicuous place, and someone else walked across in the role of valedictorian and salutatorian that my parents were. In addition to our last name, Perlman, doesn't get much more Jewish than that, when it was time for my mom to go to med school once more, we had to reach out to connections. Nothing happened for Jewish people without very intimate connections, like family or very close friends. In general, in the former Soviet Union, it was a culture of bribes. Who do you pay? Under-the-table deals. My mother was the lucky one because she had an uncle who founded a medical school in Siberia, and if she passed the tests, he would put in a good word. The same happened in getting a job. Ask yourself, how many jobs have each of us had? Now, what if every time you went to apply for a job, you had to show your license, the equivalent of a passport at that time? And there was a fifth line of identity, your nationality on your license. For the Jewish folks, it said Jew. For most people, it might say American, but for those of you lucky enough to be born Jewish, it would say Jew instead. There was a whole system designed to subdue our ability to make it in life in the former Soviet Union. Despite the constant challenge, despite those walls, each time our parents climbed, got jobs, and they overcame the fifth line of nationality. By the time my parents were offered the opportunity to come to America through Hias and Joint, two organizations that collaborated to take millions of Jews out of the former Soviet Union into America and Israel. Don't get me wrong. Despite all the obstacles, the Jew line on their passport, they were both determined people, and they succeeded. In this poisonous anti-Semitic culture of the former Soviet Union, my father was a successful entrepreneur with his successful architectural firm. My mother was a teacher in the former Soviet Union, which paid the equivalent of a doctor. Despite their success, this wasn't the kind of environment they envisioned raising my brother and I. They didn't want the same life challenges for us. The decision to come here was a heavy one, too. Despite the fact that it was tough, it was familiar. Even worse, my parents grew up in propaganda that capitalism was the enemy, and that poor American kids were starving. They were deprived of basic needs by their government. So we didn't know what we would face. We started our journey to America by traveling to Vienna for 2 weeks. Another hiccup. My grandfather was hospitalized. We didn't know how, but my parents told me that he spoke in Yiddish and they spoke in German, and it was enough to break the communication barriers. Shortly after, we traveled to Italy. I remember each evening we would gather in the square waiting for our names to be called. And 6 or 8 months later in the square, we heard, "Perlman, that was our ticket." We were going to America. We didn't know what to expect. Some families didn't know if they would sleep in the airport, if they would have food on their tables. How would it all come together? Now, I need to help you understand how the only people who helped us, who were the only people that helped us up until now in our lives, were our family and our close friends. We had none in Richmond. There was no concept of volunteer. It didn't exist. Someone who gives of themselves, time, money, possession, passion. The people you didn't know weren't interested in you, and worse, they were the ones that came for you. Maybe you said something wrong in the wrong time at work. Someone got word of it, and you disappeared. Those were the strangers that came into your life. To our surprise, the resettlement program greeted us with open arms and open hearts. You, the folks in this audience, in the Richmond community, you took us home from the airport. You had a ready apartment for our entire family. Moments ago, we didn't know where we would spend the night. We were being taken to an apartment, our apartment. Not some cellar, which we would have been grateful for, but a 3-bedroom apartment, furnished, appliances. Not just that. You made the bed. You filled the fridge. I don't know how I can express what this meant to hundreds of people that came to the Richmond communities in the 1980s and 90s. The people that left familiarity of life for the uncertainty of opportunity of the future and a second chance. Beyond the care, the humanity, and the dignity that you gave us, this community came together as a coordinated effort. It may have taken a UVA education and a master's in health administration to realize, for me, you anticipated the need of our entire families, and I could give many examples of the details. I went to RTA where I learned what it really meant to be Jewish. I don't know if anyone from the RTA community is here today, but I hope that you will take this back to Rabbi Bart, Rabbi Kleshik, and others. This is where I learned what it meant to be Jewish. This is the time it was an intellectual gift in life, of lifetime wisdom and amazingly rich traditions that I fell in love with. Instead of the wall that was Judaism for my parents. Another important detail to demonstrate the thoughtfulness of this community, we were placed in a few neighborhoods where we could socialize and rekindle the human spirit of friendship with each other as kids, as well as teenagers who needed their own circle of understanding, and adults who in this new world had to rely on one another to help each other out. I need to take you on a little bit of a side note, and Rabbi Friedman already touched on this. This pastoral portion that I receive every week now, because I'm lucky enough to send my little Sarah to RTA, who is 5 in kindergarten, came home in the Via Hafta newsletter and talked of the story of Noach and Abraham, and compared these two righteous patriarchs of Jewish history. Both were heroes in their own way. One was asked to help God, this was Noah, and the other one was Abraham, who was described as the proactive, self-motivated one. Both had a pivotal role in the survival of humanity, and I want to thank the Abrahams who were proactive, who coordinated this effort, because it wasn't just organized effort. This put together was a great deal of motivation, of righteous people who came together, by the way, from different ideologies, to accomplish something that gave us our dignity as human beings and taught us what it really meant to be Jewish. You inspired our connection to the neshama, to the Jewish soul and the Jewish identity. We, and I speak now on behalf of the kids, the parents, the grandparents, the generations born since our immigration in '89, like my little Sarah and Josh. We want to thank the Abrahams who started this resettlement project and carried it through with all of the details thought through. And the Noahs who stepped up to the plate when asked. In our minds, you are each righteous people and beacons of hope for the future. We stood on your shoulders. I hope one day we will have the opportunity to do the same. And today, many years later, we are. Kids of my generations who came through the resettlement were successful because we had choice, freedom. We are doctors, we are lawyers, we are wellness professionals, we are real estate entrepreneurs, we are self-made, fulfilled human beings. That was what our parents hoped, and what you helped us accomplish. You embedded us in Jewish schools, gave us free membership to the JCC, and we were even adopted by the network of synagogues. We did what we did. What did we do to accomplish our Jewishness? I've heard this question a couple times, and I wanted to take the opportunity to share. We love our heritage. And more, we learned it, and more enthralled in life because of it. We are students who took leadership roles in Hillel and started our own organizations, pre-Jewish VCU, which is a blessing, to teach our fellow students about the history and conflict of the Middle East. We went to APAC conferences and brought back speakers and professionals who could help us as young pipsqueaks. not quite the professionals like Jewish VCU, to navigate the waters of life on college campus and the hostility that exists even today towards Israel and the Jewish people. We stood up for what was right, and we protect kids in our schools from being bullied. And we do not stand for injustice ourselves anymore. We don't have to like our parents did. Every challenge, every time they applied for a job, we don't have to do that. No one says dirty Jew without it going unpunished. And I've done my fair share of punishing in the right way. We are supporters of Jewish life on campus, and we want to be embedded in the Jewish life today. We help our schools build communities, garden projects for kids to learn the many, so that they can learn the many life lessons and harvest lessons of Jewish teachings. More so, we welcome and partake, both as Abrahams and Noahs, in our community. As for the little generations that come after us, stick around. Life's a journey. Perhaps the next generation in Jerusalem.
I have my handkerchief ready. Good job. Thank you. Thank you so much, Ira. Ladies and gentlemen, what can be said about Jay Ibsen that has not already been said? Entrepreneur, colonel, director, pilot, philanthropist, builder, or educator. I never know how to address him. And I told him so once. He was kind enough to allow me to use his first name. He said, "Alex, just call me Colonel." If you have not seen a 10-gallon Stetson hat darting here and there on the highways and byways of the greater Richmond area, then you've either been asleep or a real newcomer to our fair city. Next time you see that hat, look closely. That blur of action and motion beneath it is Richmond's greatest Litvak, Jay Ibsen. My therapy since 2004 has been to guide as many tours as possible through our beloved Virginia Holocaust Museum. As a refugee from the Shoah, each telling of the story at the Virginia Holocaust Museum is therapeutic for me. If you've not been there, let this be your invitation to come see us, and I would be honored to give you a personal tour. Last year, 45,000 visitors passed gratis, and there is no charge, through this marvelous Richmond institution. And this year, we're on track to do even better. Every one of those thousands have Jay Ibsen to thank. Without him, there would have been no Virginia Holocaust Museum. Thank you, Jay. You've given this wandering Jew a feeling of home and place. I feel very centered. Those names etched on the wall aren't pieces of concrete or marble. They're flesh and they're blood. And each of them has a very specific and heartwarming story. Jay will share a story behind those names on the wall that you're all facing. Please all help me welcome Colonel Jay Ibsen.
Thank you for being so generous. Before I start my remarks, I would like to thank Inga. Where are you? Stand up. For making Emek Sholom what it is today. Without her drive, this would have been just another monument or tombstone to the Holocaust. We stood on their shoulders as others stood on us. In the early 1900s, because of anti-Semitism from the Russians and the Lithuanians and most of Europe, some of the Jews were lucky and left Lithuania, a land of immigrants, to America. Among those were Abraham Brown and my mother's aunt, Bessie Kolomitsky. They, Abe and Bessie, got married and started a family. In 1933, when the Nazis were elected, most did not think that anti-Semitism that Hitler wrote about in Mein Kampf would conquer Germany and Europe. By 1935, it did. In the town of Nuremberg, they passed the Nuremberg laws against the Jews. Jews could no longer practice law, teach, sit on public benches, date non-Jews, and be able to walk on a sidewalk, and so on. Similar to the segregation laws of the South. Some Jews from Germany that could fled to the United States and made their home here in Richmond, Virginia. After escaping from Kambra concentration camp, being liberated by the Russians, and escaping from them a second time, we settled in Munich, Germany. My father worked for the American Joint Distribution Committee, AJDC, as transportation chief, and was responsible for all the transportation in the American zone. In that capacity, he met Rabbi Abraham Klausner, a chaplain in the American Army. Chaplain Klausner started posting lists of survivors and sending them to the United States. Our names were on those lists. We wanted to immigrate to Palestine, but because of the British mandate from World War I, given the British control of Palestine, it was not possible. My mother's aunt and uncle, the Browns, owned Pepsi-Cola Bottling Company here in Richmond, and we made contact. There were quotas for Holocaust survivors to come to the United States. But because of local anti-Semitism, most of those quotas were going unfilled. The examining council in München would find some excuse and reject your application. Like a courthouse, you checked which room you were to go to. When some of our friends saw where we were assigned, they said we would never pass and be granted to come to this wonderful country. We walked in, and the council held up a ball of green cotton and asked me what color it was. I said, green. He said, good. If nothing else, you can wash Pepsi-Cola bottles. We had no idea what he was talking about. On the afternoon of June 12, 1947, the Browns, along with Sadie and Milton Bernstein, mother, sister, and brother-in-law, met us in a big Packard, like a limousine, in front of Main Street Station to take us to the Bernstein apartment on Cutshaw Avenue. Those newcomers started a New American Jewish Club, of which my parents were members. As Holocaust survivors from Europe landed here in Richmond, we spoke different languages, different dialects, but we had two things in common. We were Jews and wanted to be Americans. As difficult as it was, we spoke only English in public and went to night school to learn how. Our families were murdered, shot, gassed, burned, and sometimes buried alive in mass graves. No tombstone to remember them. On November 6, 1955, the members of the New American Jewish Club purchased land at Forest Lawn Cemetery, here in Richmond, Virginia, where you are sitting now, and created a Holocaust memorial. It had 201 names on it. 11 of those names are my immediate family that were murdered. On my father's side of blessed memory, Ray Leap, my grandfather, Tony Ip, my grandmother, Dora Ip, my aunt, Goldie Ip, my aunt, Marcia Ip, my sister, Jacob Ip, my cousin. On my mother's side of blessed memory, Hananya Butrimovich, my grandfather, Esther Butrimovich, my grandmother, Minnie Butrimovich, my aunt, Chaim Butrimovich, my uncle, Paivke Butrimovich, my uncle. In 2008, the German government opened Bad Arolsen records. The Nazis kept records of everyone that they murdered. Howard Margol from Atlanta was one of the first scholars allowed, and he found the execution records of some of my family that were recorded and executed. On December 6, 1987, I led a bus, and behind me were 10 other buses that left Richmond for a rally in Washington, D.C. to free Soviet Jewry. When the Jews were released by the Russians, some settled in Richmond. Additional monuments were erected to remember the families that perished in the Holocaust. If any of you would like to see the records of the executed, I have those of my family with me for you later to take a look. Those are my parents.
Edna and Izzy.
They are buried on the other side at Bethel.
Very meaningful, very heartful, and Jay continues to pay it forward. Ladies and gentlemen, this is an exceptionally rewarding part of the program every year. It's when we have a young person that we want to honor. Esther Windmuller is going to be the head of this. She's a fellow board member, and she will be introducing she will be the presenter for our Never Again Award. Pardon me. Each year our topic of Never Again changes, and Esther will tell you all about this year's theme and brag about this year's winner. Help me welcome Richmond's most recent and probably most beautiful bride, Esther Windmuller.
Thank y'all. This year, the board, normally the subject is genocide and other parts of the world and what we can do to help stop that or alleviate suffering. But the board this year added a possible essay category for bullying. And as the months have passed since that decision was made, it seems incredibly appropriate to talk about incendiary words. And I know that has a special place today as we think about the history of the Holocaust. So allow me to introduce to you Jamel Reed. It's going to take a moment because that's how wonderful he is. He lives in Urbana. He's a 17-year-old senior at Middlesex High School, where he was just voted the homecoming king. In his spare time, he likes reading fiction. He also coaches youth football, basketball. He does community service through the Regional Governor's School, and he collects U.S. currency. He is the president in a school of the National Honor Society. He's the varsity football captain. He is the president of the Future Business Leaders of America, and he plays, in his spare time on the varsity basketball team. He's also a member of the forensics team. He's an active member of his church. He's an usher and a member of the choir. He was also chosen from several thousand applicants to be part of the state-selected regional governor's school summer program. In the future, he plans to finish high school as the valedictorian of his class. He plans to attend the University of Virginia and study neuroscience, eventually leading to a medical practice. So I hope you all welcome Jamel Reed as he presents the winning essay.
Thank you, everyone. My essay is titled, Call Me By My Name. We are all human beings, therefore, we all deserve to be treated as such. I did not have the same upbringing as you, so I have no right to judge you, and you, me. I aspire to complete my own life goals while you separately aspire to complete yours. I am not you, and you are not me. The differences we have do not give you the right to label me. I am a human being, and I have a name, but the names you call me are not mine. Whether it be a societally appointed name or a derogatory name, it is not located on my birth certificate. Therefore, please refrain from using it when addressing me. Instead of trying to compartmentalize my persona versus my appearance, in reality, they are synonymous. I am a human being. I welcome you to learn my name. Your intent to hurt me is real, but I am also real. This separation you have created with your ignorance has caused you to forget that I, too, am a human being. I am neither a nigger, wetback, cracker, nor redskin. Please call me by my name. It doesn't amuse me that you use the color of my skin as a justification or stereotype. It should not be used to segregate, slander, or to justify. It is the character inside me that must be evaluated. For judging me based on stereotypical prior knowledge mitigates the connection we could have ultimately created. I do not wish to be called yellow, black, red, or white. We students have negatively created stereotypes with color that once again segregate us. If you are intelligent, you are labeled as Asian. If you speak properly, you are labeled as white. If you are athletic, you are labeled as black. Why should it matter which racial group a student belongs to? My color does not define me. It is the name I have created for myself that does. I wish to be called by my name. Your belittlement serves no purpose. It should not matter if I am gay, straight, introverted, bipolar, mentally challenged. This is not always a label I give myself. Bullies use it to separate and segregate. In school systems, this is the major problem we face as students. Nowadays, students use the term boy to address someone in comical circumstances. Students, however, do not know what the word truly implies. The term boy can go as far back as early slavery in the United States. Names give power in society, and by stripping the names from slaves, they belittled them to inhuman standards. Similarly, during the Holocaust, names were stripped from the Jewish people, and numbers were assigned, again demoting their status to that of subhuman rank. By stripping names and giving generalities to the people, the sufferer is rendered powerless. That is why, if we are going to make a change in bullying in schools, we must start with addressing people by their names and desegregating our world. Call me by my name, my real name.
Good stuff. Jamel has made a list of things that people can do to prevent bullying, and those are going to be available on the table. So when everybody's done today, please go over and get one. And it starts out by call others by their real name. And I think that one piece of that one idea, you know, the person at the grocery store or the person that delivers your mail, to learn their name and to call it, that in and of itself is a powerful thing that we can do. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you want validation for that particular essay, I encourage you to look at YouTube and look for the interview that Mike Wallace of 60 Minutes did with Morgan Freeman. He gets right into that very specific thing, saying that he does not want a Black History Month. Don't want you to refer to me as a black man. I won't refer to you as a white man. My name is Morgan Freeman, and your name is Mike Douglas, Mike Wallace, and that's how we'll address each other. Ladies and gentlemen, get your hankies out. Cantor Errol Helfman is one of a kind. A little background for those of you who are not familiar with some of our traditions. When a Jew reads an inscription from our sacred Torah, he uses a pointer called a yad. Aside from the practical aspect of not touching the delicate parchment or the ink, the spiritual aspect is important as well. The pointer is molded like a hand, with the forefinger pointing to the words on the scroll. Thus we interpret this to be the hand of God, guiding the reader, pointing the way. You see, these prayers of the Torah were not meant to be written, but to be spoken. These then are the words of God, spoken out loud, for all to hear. It would be as if God had spoken. When Cantor Helfman sings, it is as if someone on high were singing, sweet and sad all at once. Cantor Errol Helfman will sing El Mole Rahiman. It is our prayer of mercy to God for our loved ones, sung on days of remembrance for the deceased. Cantor Helfman is praying the hardest he has ever prayed, for he is praying for the 6 millions. All please rise for the sweet, sad wails of the loveliest of prayers as we welcome Cantor Errol Helfman. I got a little bit ahead of myself. This is your exercise for today. Don't bother going to the gym. You may all sit down. My sincere apologies. I got carried away with that young man's verse. It was very, very poignant, very, very pertinent, and dating specifically. And I've misplaced my program. Thank you. We're going to do the candle lighting next. Those people who have been chosen to light the candles, the sons, daughters, granddaughters, grandsons, and would our ushers help them out? Would you have an usher or two that will help these young people get the candles and light them properly on the wall?
Sarah K. Mizels, Baruch Manelis, Donna
What you're
Yibra,
hearing
Mincia Stolia,
are the names of the 460
Sheftel Stolia,
who are remembered
Chaim
on the
S.
wall.
Kaskevich,
Remember,
Israel
when you hear the names,
Moskowitz,
they're merely
Siegfried
placeholders
Reinhardt,
of the millions and millions that
Chaim
were slaughtered.
Friedman, Yossel Pasternak, Hannah
Russian
Pasternak,
violinist.
Соня Перельман, Шмая Перельман, Идл Шварцман, Хая Шварцман, Яков Шварцман,
Lene Primek is a
Berta
violinist
Schwarzman,
playing
the
meditation.
Beeler family, Dora H. Bach, Isaac Konovalov and 11 family members, Grit Matias, Heine Matias.
Hannah Simon, Frida Simon, Molly S. Hirschbaum, Michael Silberman, Clara F. Silberman, Hannah Silberman, Herman Lissman, Nanette L. Gross, Bernard Gross, Ludwig Bonnie Hardy, Gertrude I. Bonnie Hardy, Edgar Bonnie Hardy, Melly Bonnie Hardy, Ottilia G. Loward, Sophie K. Putzel, Johanna K. Heinzer, Adolf Rothfeld, Clara W. Rothfeld, Moshe L. Golub, Sarah G. Golub, Bella Golub, Simon Golub,
Anna Scher, Rosie R. Kleeblatt, Arthur Kleeblatt, Joseph J. Torheimer, Steely W. Reinskoff, William Reinskoff, Kurt Leinskoff,
Walter Tolheimer, Rachel Singer, Felicia Singer, Adi Singer, Erna M. Singer, Bernhard Singer, Israel Regenbogen.
Thank you to the candle lighters. And Errol, that's the perfect entry for meditation for you and your friend. All rise, please. Thank you. Please remain standing. Rabbi Friedman will be doing the Kaddish. Before he does, it says for 6 million sophisticated imaging devices now indicate graves that are numerous, and the numbers may go as high as 12 to 16 millions of Jews. He's praying for all of us, all of them as well.
Please join in the recital as we remember and we draw strength for moving forwards. Yitgadal ve'yitgadash shemei rabbah be'alma divra cherutei ve'amlich ba'chutei v'chol yumecho v'chayei v'chol beit Yisrael v'adalah u'bizman kariv ve'imru amen. Yeheh shmei rabbah levarach le'olam u'amei almayah yitvarach ve'yishtabach ve'yitvaher ve'yitromam ve'yitnaseh ve'yithadar ve'yithalal ve'yithalal shmei lekudesha v'richu le'elav min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata da'amiran ve'alma ve'imru amen. Yeheh Shlom Rabba min Shemaya v'chayim tovim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru amen. Oseh shalom v'imramav u'yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru
Ladies and gentlemen, you may be seated. We see many familiar faces. Meyer and Esther Winstock. If I didn't see you, I think I was in the wrong place. You're here every year. Thank you so very much. And many others as well. We'd love to see you all next year. Would you all bring a friend? In controlling the present, we control the past. And who controls the past will control the future. Our story will never change. This is an Orwellian axiom about the past, present, and the future. Our story will never change, always stay the same, but it's important to be retold every year as we gather here to speak of it again. We have people who need to be honored. We're going to ask all those present, if you would be so kind to uphold, or it's a tradition, you may follow through with this, and what we do is we take a stone and place it on the stone of a loved one to indicate that someone who cares about that person, who loves that person. And this is more than just that person, it's symbolic of all those millions. So we invite you to take a stone, but we'd like, first of all, to honor the people upon whose shoulders we stood upon. Mr. and Mrs. Tolchinsky, please come forward, grab a flower that's for you. Even both of you have a flower. Jim and Gail Plotkin, Win, please. Mr. and Mrs. Avery Lynn, Cindy Crumbine, Jason Crumbine, Melissa Crumbine. And when they finish getting a flower that they've earned and grabbing a stone, we'd like you all to do the same. Give us a moment. Give us a moment.
Ginsburg, Sally Hammerstein, Hedwig Hammerstein, Itzik Grabinski, Mikla Grabinski, Ruchel Grabinski, Raphael Grabinski, Boaz Grabinski, Faya Grabinski, Michael Grabinski, Hanin Schultzman, Shaya Schultzman, Benjamin Tepper, Ruchel Tepper.
Sally Grunenbaum, Regina Grunenbaum, Matilda Grunenbaum, Leopold Grunenbaum, Dorota Hirsch, Walter Grunwald, Max Grunwald, Gustav Newhall, Fritz Newhall, Tony Frolich, Irma Gronsberg, Jenny Hamburger, Lottie Hamburger, Marcus Ruth, Julius Hono, Rosa Hono, Lotta Hono, Isaac Waller, Abraham Waller.
Bredel Ip, Tonya Ip, Dora Ip, Golde Ip, Marshale Ip, Jacob Ip, Hanania Butrimovic, Esther Butrimovic, Mine Butrimovic, Chaim Butrimovic, Feivel Butrimovic, Hedwig Levenstein, Leah R. Hirsch, Chaim O. Hirsch, Leopold Katz, Sarah Katz, Dina Katz, Malcolm Katz, Adolf Katz,
Frida Brunner, Wolf Silverstein, Mina Abrahamson, Pauline Kuhn, David Ambach, Fanny Ambach, Betty Fruhoff, Simon Koch, Emma Koch, Elsie Kern, Gertrude Kern, Fritz Stein, Linda Kahn.
Julia Kaufman, Meyer Hirsch, Regina K. Hirsch, Edwin H. Sand, Moritz I. Bachdal, Martha H. Bachdal, Ingeborg Bachdal, Moses Bayer, Ita Brandman, Newson Brandman, Sena Berenstein, Sora Rivka Rabinovich, Beryl Rabinovich, and the Rabinovich descendants, Hannah Kapusta, Yosel Kapusta, family members of Morton and Bella Weiss, Jacob Dreyfus, Ida B. Dreyfus,
Libes Gorlicki, Dwyra Citron Gorlicki, Bluma Citron, Israel Citron, Baruch Lerner Lamdani, Paula Lerner Lamdani, Wolf Reiser, Hannah Zitte Reiser,